I want to give you guys my 2021 NFL preseason power rankings. Now, I'm not a big fan of these power rankings. As a matter of fact, a lot of people have been asking me to do weekly power rankings. I'm not really going to do that because, first of all, it's really hard to rank all 32 teams on a week-to-week basis, in my opinion. And on top of that, it's a little bit more time-consuming. So if I do power rankings, then that's going to take away from time that I have to do other videos like the weekly preview and prediction videos that a lot of you guys love watching. So I figured I will compromise, and I would give you guys my preseason power rankings, how I'm going to be looking at these teams heading into the preseason and before the NFL season kicks off in a couple of weeks. So starting off, number 32, I have the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans are the worst team in the NFL, in my opinion. Even if Deshaun Watson plays this year, there's not a lot of talent. There's not a lot of talent at wide receiver. The defense isn't great. You lost your best player in franchise history in J.J. Watt, who's now at the Arizona Cardinals. So I don't really think the Texans are going to be good this year. As a matter of fact, I definitely think that they could end up being the first team in the NFL history to go 0-17. Then you got Philadelphia. Philadelphia's roster isn't as bad as Houston's, but you do have a lot of questions when it comes to that defense. When it comes to linebacker, you don't really have that much depth at corner. Outside from Darius Slay and Steven Nelson, there's not a lot of great options there. The defensive line, it's not that bad, but I feel like it could be better. Then you look at the offensive line. The offensive line definitely isn't bad, but it just comes down to, can everybody stay healthy? At wide receiver, aside from Devontae Smith, I don't really have a lot of confidence in the other wide receivers behind them. And also Devontae Smith, can he stay healthy? Because training camp has already kicked off not too long into it, and Devontae Smith is already dealing with some injuries there. So for Philadelphia, I have them at number 31. I have the New York Jets at number 30. I have a lot of confidence in Robert Saleh. I think he's going to be a phenomenal coach for the New York Jets, but he's taking over a New York Jets team that doesn't really have a lot of talent. Now, offensively, they have a good amount of talent. As a matter of fact, they have way more talent this year on the offensive side of football than what they did last season. I believe that the offense is going to be better this year than what the defense is going to be this year. And it may be crazy because Robert Saleh is a defensive-minded coach, but a lot of people have to remember that that defense wasn't good overnight with Robert Saleh when he was the head coach. Well, not the head coach, but the defensive coordinator for the 49ers. It took him a year to get that defense running, and it also took him a year to get the players that he wanted to run the defense that he wanted to run. So with the New York Jets, they don't really have all that much talent on the defense side of football. As a matter of fact, they may be the second least talented team on that side of the ball. You have questions at corner. Okay, you have Quinnen Williams. Your defensive line is pretty solid. Linebacker isn't that bad. But outside of Marcus May, that secondary may be the worst in the NFL behind Houston or ahead of the Houston Texans. So for the New York Jets, I think this team could end up surprising a lot of people. They could win more games than what some people believe they will. A lot of people have them winning 3 games. I think they probably could win 4 or 6 at best. But overall, the Jets, although I think they're going to be well coached, I just think that they're missing a lot of talent. Then you have the Atlanta Falcons at number 29. Atlanta is going to be a team that's going to be able to compete just because of how good I feel their offense is going to be this year. I don't think Matt Ryan is going to regress to the point that you can't get nothing out of him. I think the offensive line should improve. You're going to have an improved running game with Arthur Smith taking over as the head coach. And Arthur Smith was the OC for Tennessee last year. This is a guy who loves to run the football and run it down your throat. So I think Atlanta's offense is going to be really good. But overall, I don't think their team is going to be really good, because for Atlanta to have success, I think they're going to have to be able to outscore everybody. And a lot of Atlanta fans have been saying that I'm wrong on the defense. The defense is going to improve. The thing is that you don't have that much talent on defense. You don't have that much of a pass rush outside of Grady Jarrett. Dante Fowler can't stay healthy. So, the pass rush is a big concern. The secondary is a big concern. Yeah, you have some young players there, but overall, we don't really know how great those players are. For all we know, those players might not be all that great. So for Atlanta, their defense is going to be their Achilles heel this year. I think Atlanta is going to be competitive, simply for the fact that they can put a lot of points on the board. But if you want to win games in the NFL, you cannot score everybody. You got to have some defense there. I have Cincinnati at 28. I think Cincinnati is a really interesting team. I feel like if you put Cincinnati in the AFC South, I think they could potentially finish second place in that division. But you look at how competitive the AFC North is this year. You have Pittsburgh, who a lot of people have their reservations about Pittsburgh this year. You have Baltimore and Cleveland, who are two teams who a lot of people are expecting to be Super Bowl contenders this year. So for Cincinnati, they're in a really tough division. They're one of the toughest divisions in all of the NFL. I definitely feel like this defense has some concerns when it comes to the linebacker position. I'm not all that high on the secondary, neither when it comes to cornerback. But you do have a lot of great players on the offensive side of football. You got Joe Mixon returning. You got Joe Burrow returning from a pretty good rookie campaign, even though it was cut short. You bring in Jamar Chase from this past year's NFL draft, and now you have one of the best wide receiving cores in all of the NFL. But can the offensive line hold up? That was the problem for Cincinnati last year, and I don't think the offensive line is going to be all that improved this season. You got Detroit at number 27. I think that a lot of people are sleeping on the Detroit Lions, not only just Detroit, but the Jacksonville Jaguars in general. And I've already made several bets with a lot of people that the Detroit Lions and that the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to win 6 games or more this year. I'm betting on both of those two teams being really competitive football teams. When you look at Detroit doesn't have a lot of talent on their roster. Now, they don't have, now their talent situation isn't as bad as the Houston Texans or the New York Jets or anything like that, but you definitely do have some questions at wide receiver. But you have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. You got Jared Goff at quarterback, which Jared Goff isn't great, but I don't think he's one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. You can win with Jared Goff if you give him the right situation. The defense has some concerns. The defensive line is going to be really good, especially when it comes to getting pressure on the quarterback. I don't think cornerback is all that bad. Jeff Okudah, hopefully he can have a pretty good second season after having a really terrible campaign. And you got to think about it. You had COVID, and you also had Matt Patricia, who didn't really put any of the players on the defense side of football in good spots to succeed. So I think Jeff Okudah could have a bounce back season, or he could have a really good sophomore campaign this year. I also have Emmanuel Warrior, who I think is really underrated. I think he's the best cornerback on the Detroit Lions roster as of right now. But linebacker is a huge concern. Safety is a huge concern for Detroit. But I definitely believe that Detroit is going to be a competitive football team this year, and I think they should be able to win at least 6 games or more. Same thing for the Jacksonville Jaguars. You look at Urban Meyer, and you look at the situation that Urban Meyer is taking over. I think Urban Meyer, out of all of the new head coaches who were hired this past offseason, I think that he has the best situation out of all of them when it comes to a talent standpoint, because Jacksonville has been bad for over the last decade. Aside from that one year when they went to the AFC Championship game and lost to the New England Patriots, they've been stacking talent for over the last couple of years. So it's no surprise that Jacksonville has one of the most, if not the most, talented young roster in the NFL. You got Trevor Lawrence at QB. You have a pretty solid offensive line when everybody's able to stay healthy. You have a really good group of young wide receivers. You have DJ Chark. You have Laviska Shenault. You have Marvin Jones, who you picked up in free agency. You also have James Robinson, who was the best rookie running back in the NFL last year. You got Travis Etienne. So there's a lot of great players on this Jacksonville Jaguars offense. Same thing for the defense. The defense struggled last year. I think it was more due to injuries. You have Josh Allen, who had a really disappointing season last year after coming off a 10-sack season as a rookie, and that's because he was unable to stay on the field due to injury concerns. But when he's on the field, he's really good. Same thing with C.J. Henderson. C.J. Henderson was pretty solid, but he also dealt with injuries. You got Caleb Von Chasen, who didn't really have a great rookie season. Hopefully he can have a better season this year going into year 2, and you improve the secondary. You bring in Shaquille Griffin. I know Shaquille Griffin isn't, a stud, anything like that. He's pretty inconsistent, but he does bring an upgrade there to that other cornerback spot on the opposite side of C.J. Henderson, because last year Jacksonville literally had guys playing off the street at cornerback for this team. Then you look at linebacker. Linebacker is really good with Miles Jack and Joe Schobert there. The question is going to be the interior of that defensive line when it comes to defensive tackle and nose tackle. But overall, I feel like Jacksonville has a really solid roster, and I believe that this team is also going to be really competitive in that they're going to be winning 6 games or more this season. Now you look at Denver. Denver is a really interesting team. Because when you look at this team from a talent standpoint, they're definitely deserve to be higher than 25th. But their quarterback situation is going to decide how far this team goes. Now, as of right now, it seems like Drew Lock is going to be the obvious favorite to win, according to what I've been hearing coming out of training camp. Teddy Bridgewater hasn't been looking all too hot. Drew Lock has been pretty good during his performance so far during training camp. So if Drew Lock ends up improving, and he has been working with Peyton Manning a lot over this offseason, and he has a better season than what he had last year, I definitely think Denver is a team that can get to the playoffs because you have all the talent in the world. You have a pretty good group of running backs. You have a really solid offensive line. You have Cortland Sutton coming back along with Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler. You got Noah Fant. So you have a lot of weapons to work with in the passing game. Defensively, the Denver Broncos defense was really good last year. I expect this defense to be even better this year with the addition of Patrick Surtain. So for Denver, it really just comes down to how much they get out of the quarterback position. I don't even think they need great quarterback play. Like, I think if Denver can at least get average to above average QB play out of Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater, whichever one of those guys ends up getting the nod, I think that they can end up making it to the playoffs if they can get solid QB play out of either one of those guys. You got the New York Giants. I think the New York Giants are in a similar situation with the Denver Broncos. I think this is a team that's going to be solely dependent on how well their quarterback performs and Daniel Jones. Now, the offensive line is still not great. This was one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL last year, and the offensive line hasn't improved. As a matter of fact, one of their starters from last year has already went down for injury, so the offensive line already takes a really big hit. So I don't know how far the Giants are going to go this year. Like, Daniel Jones could surprise me. He could play pretty well, but the offensive line doesn't really give me a lot of encouragement. Even though Saquon's coming back, that's not going to help out the offensive line because you're only as good as the guys who you have blocking in front of you. So the offensive line, Daniel Jones, are huge concerns that I have for the New York Giants, but this is definitely one of the more improved teams heading into the upcoming NFL season. You look at what this team did in the offseason, bringing in Kenny Galladay. You also brought in Adoree Jackson as well, so the defense should still be pretty good under defensive coordinator Patrick Graham, who could end up being a head coaching candidate next year at the start of the offseason for 2022. But overall, I don't really know how good the Giants are going to be this year in terms of them being a playoff contender with the question that they have on the offensive line and Daniel Jones being, you don't really know what you're going to get out of them. You got Arizona at 23. Arizona is a really interesting team because the talent is definitely there. It just depends on how well Cliff Kingsbury is going to be this year. And Cliff Kingsbury has to improve from year one to year two. Arizona has become a significantly better team. Now this year, it just depends on how well he's going to do at coaching this team up. If Cliff Kingsbury ends up not being that great of a coach this season, then Arizona most definitely is going to miss the playoffs, and he definitely could be on his way out. But Cliff Kingsbury definitely has had this team trending in the right direction. They have gotten better every single season, but this is the year that he has to be able to put it together. You look at the Las Vegas Raiders. Similar situation with the Arizona Cardinals, although you have questions about the defense. Is this defense going to improve? Because the Las Vegas Raiders haven't had a good defense in going on a decade and a couple of years from that. So, I mean, pretty much, I don't think the Las Vegas Raiders will have a good defense in 12 or 13 years. So that's a very long time. Even when you had Jack Del Rio as your head coach, you still didn't have a great defense when he was the head coach, and he was a defensive-minded coach, and the offense was better than the defense. So when you look at the Las Vegas Raiders, man, two questions. Is this defense going to improve under Gus Bradley? And two, are you going to be able to start the season out as good as what you finished? Because normally for the Las Vegas Raiders, this is a team that is really good at the first part of the season. But once we get into the month of November, which is where the real NFL season begins, after Thanksgiving is where we start to see the pretenders separate themselves from the contenders. The Las Vegas Raiders normally end up being on the opposite side of that discussion. They normally end up being in that pretender conversation, because I tell people, the NFL season is not about how well you start, it's about how well you finish. And all the teams who end up starting out, not all that great, they end up getting really hot in the month of November, heading into the month of December, and end up making it into the playoffs. And the Las Vegas Raiders end up going really cold after Thanksgiving in the month of December, and end up fizzling down the stretch like they did when they lost to the Miami Dolphins on Thursday Night Football. You had one of the biggest upsets of the year when they lost to the Atlanta Falcons. So for the Las Vegas Raiders, it all comes down to, is that defense going to improve? The Raiders don't even need to have the best defense in the NFL. They just need to have an average defense, and I think this team can make it into the playoffs. You look at the Bears. The Bears are a team that I think they're average. I think this is a pretty good spot to rank them. I think this is a team that could go either way. They could make it to the playoffs. They could not. You look at the whole quarterback conversation they have with Andy Dalton and Justin Fields. It is pretty widely expected for Andy Dalton to be the starter. It's already been stated several times throughout training camp in the offseason from Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace that they are in no hurry to get Justin Fields in there. And I understand why you don't want to have the same thing happen when Justin Fields happened to Mitchell Trubisky, where you throw him into the fire too early. He ends up struggling. But you look at Andy Dalton, I definitely feel like Andy Dalton is a better upgrade than Mitchell Trubisky. And I definitely feel like you can win with Andy Dalton, but there's also going to be a couple of games that you're going to lose because of Andy Dalton. So I feel like the Bears can go either way. Look at the Carolina Panthers at 20. The Carolina Panthers are a fringe playoff team. This is a team that can go from a borderline playoff team to sneaking into the playoffs. And that defense is going to be really good this year. I feel like the Panthers have one of the more underrated defenses heading into the upcoming 2021 NFL season. You got Brian Burns, who could have a breakout season. He's really underrated. You got Jeremy Chin, who had a really phenomenal rookie season. You also bring in J.C. Horn. Like, the Carolina Panthers have a really good defense, and I think their defense is going to be a really great unit this year. Now, at offense, okay, on the offensive side of football, you have a question when it comes to your offensive line. Aside from Morton, your offensive line is a huge concern. You look at Sam Darnold, how well is he going to perform? Even though he does have a better situation in terms of what he ever had to work with the New York Jets, I don't really know how great that offensive line is going to be. Then you got Christian McCaffrey coming back fully healthy. That's going to be a bonus. So honestly, I think Carolina's a team that could sneak into the playoffs. They could be a borderline playoff team. You look at Minnesota. I'm not as high on Minnesota as a lot of other people are. I still don't really trust that secondary. That secondary had a lot of growing pains, and although it was fairly young, I understand that argument. At the same time, I just don't really trust it. You did lose a pretty good amount of talent on defense. Okay, the defensive line, I don't think it's all that bad. I think it's pretty solid. Linebackers really great, but I honestly don't really trust that secondary. Then you look at the offensive side of football. Okay, the offensive line should be improved. I think the offense should be fairly good as well, but I don't really know how good that secondary is going to be this season for Minnesota. You look at Indianapolis. I'm still pretty high on Indianapolis. I still think that Indianapolis is a playoff contender without Carson Wentz being out for the next couple of months due to an injury that he sustained. I think Jacob Eason could get Indianapolis, into a position that they can be a playoff contender, because you got to remember, this was a team that came really close to making it into the playoffs with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback not too long ago. And you look at Frank Reich. Frank Reich is one of the best offensive minds in the NFL, and the sign of a good offensive-minded head coach is one who can win with whoever he has at quarterback. So you look at Frank Reich, I think he definitely can have success with Jacob Eason. You look at the Miami Dolphins at 17. The Miami Dolphins are a really interesting team because I do like Tua. A lot of people aren't really all that high on Tua, but I like the supporting cast that he has. But that offensive line is fairly young. I don't know if that offensive line is going to continue to struggle and have growing pains, or the offensive line is going to end up having a really good season this year with a lot of the young stars that he have. You also have some holes on defense. We don't really know what's going to happen with the whole Xavier Howard thing. We don't know if he's going to get traded or if the Miami Dolphins are just going to go ahead and, give him a little bit of a increase in, salary. Then you got holes at linebacker. I don't think linebacker is all that great when it comes to pass coverage. So there are some concerns about the Miami Dolphins that I am interested to see how they unfold throughout the preseason and training camp. Look at the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys have a lot of talent on this roster. You have Dak Prescott returning after having his season cut short. And this team is definitely night and day compared to when Dak Prescott plays and when he doesn't play. For a while, everybody was under the assumption that Ezekiel Elliott was the motor that made the Dallas Cowboys offense go. And honestly, we saw that wasn't true, because when Dak Prescott went down, Ezekiel Elliott's productions went down along with Dak Prescott's season. So with Dak Prescott coming back and the off the line also dealing with some injuries last season, coming back fully healthy, I think that the Dallas Cowboys are a team that could make it into the playoffs and have some postseason success. It just depends on how well of a job Mike McCarthy and that coaching staff does this year. You look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, I have them at number 15. Pittsburgh is a team that I feel is being heavily underrated going into this year. I think a lot of people are blowing the whole offensive line thing out of proportion. I don't think the Steelers have the worst offensive line in the NFL. I think the fact that the Steelers had so much turnover when it came to the offensive line scares a lot of people. And anytime you have a lot of unfamiliarity, there's going to be some concerns there. But I feel like Pittsburgh's offensive line is going to be really solid. Big Ben is going to be good enough to still win you a Super Bowl. He can still win you some games there. He carried the Steelers offense for a good portion of last season because they had no running game. Now you improve that by bringing in Najee Harris in this past year's NFL draft in the first round, 24th overall. I think Najee Harris, if he ends up having a great season, which I believe that he will, the Steelers are going to be a playoff football team. And I think that Najee Harris is going to end up being one of the best running backs in the NFL fairly quickly. Then you look at the New Orleans Saints. I think the New Orleans Saints are going to end up making it into the playoffs. I know a lot of people have concerns about Jameis Winston and whatnot, but Sean Payton revitalized Drew Brees' career. Remember, Drew Brees had a high number of turnovers when he was coming from San Diego. He went to Sean Payton, and Sean Payton and him ended up having a good connection, good chemistry. He ended up resurrecting Drew Brees' career, and from that point on, Drew Brees ended up becoming a future first ballot Hall of Famer. Now he's retired, he's out the door. It looks like Jameis Winston is going to be the guy who ends up getting the nod. Taysom Hill, maybe he could be the starting guy, but either way, I think if Jameis Winston ends up winning the starting job, I think New Orleans is going to make it into the playoffs, because everything that Jameis Winston didn't have in Tampa Bay, he now has with the New Orleans Saints. He has stability at coaching. Okay, never really had that. He went through 3 different head coaches during his time with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Lovie Smith, Dirk Cutter, Bruce Arians. You have a really good rushing attack with Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray. You have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. I don't think receiver is all that bad as some people may make it out to be. I think Traquan Smith could break out this year. Got Alan Trotman at tight end who could be in for a breakout season. The defense should be pretty good this year, although you do have concerns when it comes to the pass rush and when it comes to who's going to be that second cornerback, who's going to be replacing Janoris Jenkins on the opposite side of Marshawn Lattimore. I think their defense should be pretty solid, so I think the Saints are going to make it to the playoffs this year. Look at Seattle. I think Seattle, I have them at number 13. I think they're going to be pretty good this year as well. As a matter of fact, Seattle has gotten better. They're a better team this year than what they were last year. And their defense, I think, can end up being a really good defense this year. Their defense struggled out the gate, but they're in the second half of last year from week 10 to their last playoff game. Their defense definitely improved. Then you look at the Chargers. The Chargers are a team that a lot of people expect to go from, worst to going into the playoffs with the addition of bringing in head coach Brandon Staley. And they have all the talent there. Brandon Staley did a very good job turning around that defense for the Rams last year. They went from an average defense to the best defense in the league. And you look at the Chargers, he has all the talent to be able to do that same thing, that same magic that he did with the Rams last year. You got Joey Bosa, you got Derwin James coming back fully healthy. You have a really good group of linebackers there. You got some talent at cornerback, especially with bringing in Asante Samuel Jr. So I think that the Chargers are going to be in the playoffs as well. They probably could steal a game from Kansas City this year. There are a lot of Kansas City fans who also agree and feel like the Chargers could steal a game from them. Then you look at Washington. Washington at number 11. I was really close to having Washington as a top 10 team, but you don't really know of Ryan Fitzpatrick. Ryan Fitzpatrick is the most volatile quarterback I've ever seen in NFL history. He can give you some MVP performances for 5 straight weeks in a row, and then he can have some really bad games. So you don't really know what you want to get out of him, and I don't really know how improved the offensive line is going to be this season as well. But you did improve the skill position. You did improve the wide receiver position with the addition of Curtis Samuel. You got Terry McLaurin there, one of the most underrated wide receivers in the league. I think Antonio Gibson is going to have a breakout season, and Washington probably could have the best defense in the NFL this year. Now moving into the top 10. I have Tennessee at number 10. Tennessee is a team that is a Super Bowl contender. They're definitely in that discussion. And I believe that they were already a Super Bowl contender in my eyes before they traded for Julio Jones. Now you add Julio Jones. I don't know how you're going to stop that offense. Now you got A.J. Brown, Julio Jones that you have to deal with. Now you also got Derrick Henry. But my question is, what's going to happen at tight end? You know, how's the tight end position going to look? Now, defense is a huge question, because if that defense doesn't improve, then I don't think Tennessee is going to get that far into the playoffs. But if that defense improves, then you definitely can see Tennessee in that Super Bowl discussion. Now, the San Francisco 49ers are at number 9. The 49ers were a team that was heavily devastated by injuries last year. And despite the fact that he had so many injuries last year, this was still a team that was still really competitive. And that was with, Nick Mullins and C.J. Beathard at quarterback. So they pretty much were still effective on offense with 3 different quarterbacks last year. Now, Jimmy Garoppolo is expected to be the starter at quarterback for week 1. Trey Lance probably is going to sit out this year. But regardless, I still think that the 49ers, if they're able to have everybody stay fully healthy, that this team is going to be really good. They're going to be right back to where they were previously in 2019. You got the Buffalo Bills, who are also really talented. You bring in Emmanuel Sanders, and although he's up there in age, he's pretty much on his last leg. I think he's going to end up being pretty good. Okay, you also have Davis, who also was pretty good for them last year. So Buffalo is stacked on offense, but the question is going to be, is the rushing attack going to improve? Because Buffalo was a pass-heavy team last year, and the reason for that wasn't just because they had so much success throwing the football, but it's because they didn't really have that much success running the football. And also, is that pass rush going to improve this year for Buffalo? Because if Buffalo wants to be in that Super Bowl conversation, that pass rush has to be better than what it was last year. You got Baltimore at number 7. Baltimore is a team that I definitely can see in that Super Bowl discussion. Now, it just depends on how much that passing attack develops. And it's not going to be because of Lamar Jackson. It's going to be, firstly, are those young receivers on that roster going to be able to step up? I think the addition of Sammy Watkins was much needed. I think he may be one of the most underrated free agency signings from the free agency period. You also have J.K. Dobbins, who I think is going to have a breakout season. The offensive line, I think the offensive line could take a step back. It's not going to be bad, but it's definitely not going to be the great offensive line play we have been accustomed to seeing out of Baltimore over the last couple of years. But I think Baltimore definitely is going to be in that Super Bowl conversation. I have them at number 7. Now, at number 6, have the New England Patriots. The New England Patriots, like the 49ers, although they didn't have a lot of injuries, they had injuries, and you had a lot of your best players who ended up opting out before the season began, and yet New England was still really competitive. And if Cam Newton never had COVID and he was playing up to the level that he was before he came back from COVID, and a couple of things would have went their way, New England probably could have got into the playoffs last year. So you look at New England, I think they're the 6th best team in the NFL. You have one of the most talented rosters in the NFL. You have depth at every single position. And although you don't have stars at every single position, like at wide receiver or on the defensive line, like you have a lot of depth at every single position. So for the New England Patriots, I mean, you can rotate guys in, keep guys fresh. If you have one guy go down for injury, it's not going to be no biggie, because you're going to have more guys who can come in and produce at a pretty high level. And then on top of that, rather Cam Newton or Mac Jones be the starting quarterback this year, I still feel like New England is going to have success either way. You got Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, which is the best tight end duo in the NFL going into this year. You're going to have a pretty good rushing attack. So for New England, I think this is a team that a lot of people are really sleeping on this year, and I feel like this team is going to wake a lot of people up. A lot of people think that New England is done. I don't think so. I think New England is going to be able to reclaim the AFC East this year, and Bill Belichick, the Sith master that is Bill Belichick, aka Palpatine 2.0, is going to show everybody why he's the greatest coach in NFL history. At number 5, I have the Green Bay Packers. Now, Aaron Rodgers is coming back. That saga is now finished. Thank God. We didn't know when that was going to happen. We didn't know if he was going to play, if he wasn't going to play. Now he's coming back. I think Green Bay is still in that Super Bowl conversation. Now, in terms of them being a Super Bowl contender, I just say they are because they have Aaron Rodgers, but I don't really take them serious in that Super Bowl conversation because this is a team that oftentimes comes up short. And it's not because of what they've done in the past, just that I don't really know if Green Bay has the horses defensively to get into the Super Bowl. I have questions about linebacker. Pass rush is still good. But overall, I don't really know how good that linebacker position is going to be for Green Bay this season. Then you have the LA Rams. The LA Rams, I feel like, are going to be my pick to win the NFC this year with the addition of Matthew Stafford. I think he's an upgrade from Jared Goff. I definitely think that he's going to end up getting the Rams to the NFC Conference Championship game this year. I know Cam Akers went down, but people act like Darrell Henderson is a slouch. Like Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers had the same numbers last year. As a matter of fact, Darrell Henderson had more touchdowns and a higher yards per carry average than Cam Akers. So I don't think that's that big of a loss. The Rams still have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. You have a really great group of wide receivers, and I do think their defense is still going to be pretty good, although it will be a drop-off due to the fact that Brandon Staley is now the head coach for the Chargers. I still think with Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey, you're still going to have a really good defense. Then you look at Cleveland. Cleveland is one of the most talented teams in all the NFL. This team pretty much has no weaknesses. At linebacker, probably is their only position of concern, but you look at corner, you look at safety, you look at edge rusher, they have it all. At wide receiver, they're stacked. You got Baker Mayfield, who is a really good quarterback when you give him the pieces around him. You got Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, which is the best 1-2 punch in the NFL. And you have one of the 5 best offensive lines in the league. Then I have Kansas City at number 2. This is a team that already was really good, but they lost in the Super Bowl due to having injuries to the offensive line. Now you improve the offensive line. You simply bring in the Avengers of the offensive line. So I think Kansas City is going to be right back up there. I think they're probably going to end up making it to the Super Bowl for a 3rd straight year in a row. And you got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who bring back the whole entire Super Bowl roster from last season. So this is my 2021 preseason power rankings going into the upcoming NFL season, going into the preseason. You guys let me know what you guys think about it down in the comment section down below.